Well, goddamn. I really want to meet this Winfield. I mean, that's an impressive person. All right, I'm not going to take a lot of your time, but, instead of spending a lot of time talking about those things that I've accomplished, I would rather take 10 minutes, if I have that much time, to tell you things that I think would make a difference in your journey to law school. I graduated from Howard Law and from GW Law after Morehouse. After that, I became the chief clerk, judicial clerk, for the chief judge of the U.S. Virgin Islands. After that, I became a prosecutor. And then I went on to the U.S. Department of Labor and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Currently, I serve as the Deputy Chief of Staff for the Mayor. In all of that time, I've seen a lot, and I share it with my students constantly. So they've heard most of this before. But I want to share it with you today because it is so rare that I get this many attorneys or future attorneys of color in one room. The first thing I want to ask you is, how many times have you heard that there are too many attorneys? Have you heard that before? Okay. Guess what? There are not enough attorneys that look like you. There are not enough attorneys of color, male or female. Where do we need more attorneys of color? We need them in law firms. We need them in the judiciary. We need them in the government, city, county, federal, you name it. We need them in politics. We need them in the district attorney's office. We need them in the public defender's office. One thing that struck me practicing law in Atlanta is how rare it was to see attorneys of color in certain offices. So when I practiced at the U.S. Department of Labor, I was the only African-American male attorney in that office. When I practiced at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development as Associate General Counsel, I was the only African-American male attorney in that office. We're in Atlanta, not Montana, not Alaska. We're in Atlanta, Georgia, home to numerous African-American attorneys. That should not be the case. But when I was a prosecutor, guess what? When I walked into court every day, the people in that courtroom looked just like me and you. And there's a problem there. And the only way that we can address that problem is by having more of you go to law school, more of you practice in law. And it might mean that you think outside of the box, right? Atlanta does have lots of attorneys. But guess what? There are whole counties in Georgia that don't have attorneys of color. And you need to think about that. As you start to go into your law school career, start now thinking about the type of law that you want to practice. Why? Because you need to start planning now. You need to think about scholarships now. When you're applying to law school, make sure that you ask for scholarship money. People may not tell you that, but you need to ask. Because the worst thing that they can say is no. Right? And if you get scholarship money, it can make a difference. If you want to practice, be a solo practitioner, it makes a difference in how much debt you have. So for instance, Morehouse costs $40,000 a year. If you go to law school and it's $60,000 a year, you already have $500,000 in debt. Can you be a solo practitioner with $500,000 in debt? So ask for money. Don't just assume that if they don't give you money, that there is no money there or that you shouldn't ask for it. Start treating applying to law school as if you are an adult. I don't know if anybody has ever said that to you before. But just as they are sort of interviewing you, you need to interview the law schools. Right? Make sure it's the right fit for you. Make sure that diversity is important to that law school, because if it isn't, then you shouldn't be there. If they are unwilling to give you scholarships, maybe you shouldn't be there. Because if you want to go into public interest law, right, you can't have $500,000 worth of debt. If you want to be a solo practitioner, you can't have $500,000 worth of debt. So those are things that I challenge you to do. How many of you have moot court programs in your undergraduate institution? Not Morehouse. All right, listen. The other thing that I want to challenge you to do is right now, while you're in undergrad, take advantage of as many opportunities as you have at your disposal. One of the things that makes Morehouse pre-law program so great is that I make sure that all of the students who go through my pre-law program do at least 2 internships, right? We have internships with the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. We have clerkships that you can do while you're still in undergrad. We have them with public defenders' offices. We have them with law firms. One of the partnerships that I'm happiest about is with LL.M. who's sitting on the front row. Stand up. And she is the executive director of Gideon's Promise, which provides resources for public defenders' offices across the country. If you've not watched the documentary Gideon's Army, you should watch it, because that documentary is based on the work that they do. And we partnered with them so that our students, I think we had 6 students this year, did an internship with Gideon's Promise. Exposure is key. Do as many internships as possible. Get yourself out there. If you have a moot court program, take advantage of it. Morehouse became the only HBCU to actually win the National Moot Court competition. No other HBCU has done that before, and no other HBCU has done it since. And we're going to do it again this year, right? Okay. The other thing that I would challenge you to do is don't run from constructive criticism. I am very hard on my students. Now, I don't have to teach at Morehouse because I have 16 or 17 other jobs. I teach at Morehouse because I want to be there and I want to make a difference, but that comes with a price. That means that my students get cussed out, right? Is that not true? Okay, that is true, but they know that it is because I care about them and their future. They learn not to run from constructive criticism. Too many times, you find individuals that have been sort of raised by helicopter parents. They've never been allowed to fail. Those students can be a challenge. But at some point, you have to realize that there are people out there that are going to challenge you to be better, and you have to take it and go, right? There isn't a student that goes through my pre-law program that doesn't have at least 100 or 200 tough conversations with me, okay? So the only other thing that I want to close out on is start thinking about your careers early. Think about what type of career you want to have after law school. Think about if you need scholarships. Don't be afraid to ask for them. Get as much experience and exposure as you possibly can now. And I don't just work with Morehouse students. If any of you ever have a question, meet me here on the front row, and I will give you my card. Because to me, getting more people of color into the practice of law is just that important. Email me, call me, contact me, because it is just that important. Thank you.